All right. Again, welcome to Business 211, Supervision, Online with Professor Joe Lane. Well, we're halfway through Unit 2 or Test 2 material. We've covered Chapter 5, we covered Chapter 6. Now we're getting ready to get into Chapter 7. Go back here a look again, and I know I do this kind of as I start each of these videos, but it's kind of important for us to realize all the things that this first line supervisor has to do, because that very well could be your position as you finish here at Delta, graduate, go out and start your career. We've done the leadership, we've done the change agent, the communicator, we've talked about setting the example, we've talked about being an effective decision maker. Supervisors also have to evaluate or appraise their employees. Now sometimes it seems like everybody gets uptight about that. Supervisors don't like to they don't like, I got to do my appraisals. And then employees are like, oh my gosh, he's going to come evaluate me. I've got to go through that annual evaluation or however often it's done. And I think, now, Professor Ryan Pierce is my boss. As I've mentioned before, he's a wonderful boss. As a matter of fact, if you want to let him know that I said that, maybe that'll help out. So, if you want to put in a good word for me, you're perfectly okay to do that. Now, okay, seriously. Professor Pierce comes in during the semester, and he'll sit in and do an evaluation of our class. Now, do I get a little bit nervous when Professor Pierce comes in? The answer is yes, because I'm being evaluated. Am I confident in what I'm doing? Yes. Am I confident that I know the subject matter? Yes. But so why do you get nervous? Because it's important. I think it's okay to you can't let your nerves go crazy, but if you don't get a little nervous or excited about something, it probably doesn't mean very much to you. So yeah, I may get a little nervous, when Professor Pierce comes in, but I know he is a very fair evaluator, and I know, the purpose. Let me talk about the purpose of appraisals or evaluation is to improve performance. Hey, I'm going to go in there and evaluate that person so I can fire them. That's not the attitude, that's not the environment that you want within your area or your department. Sometimes does somebody have to be terminated? As you're a supervisor and you have an employee that maybe one day will lead to termination. We'll be talking about that in Chapter 8. Well, it is. But is that the reason you do performance appraisals? No. The reason you do performance appraisals is to find out, make sure and understand how your employees are doing, and see if there are ways that you can even help them to do better. So if the supervisor has that kind of attitude, and that's Professor Pierce's attitude, Professor Pierce likes to come into a class. He likes to come into class and see what's going on. As a matter of fact, I was talking to Professor Pierce, I think it was earlier this week, and he told me that he had been watching some of my videos that I did for management. And I thought, you've been watching some of these videos? And he even mentioned to me in a particular chapter some things that I said about something, and he said, now I understand why you have feelings about such and such the way you do. Well, that really impressed me. I mean, the fact that he would watch them pick up on things like that. So anyway, I always enjoy when Professor Pierce comes in. And the evaluation process that we have here at Delta, I mean, it's not a scary thing. He sets the stage well, and our evaluations go well. That's the responsibility of the supervisor, to not make the evaluation time a time of dread and fear, but make sure the employees understand, hey, I'm doing this to keep you on course, to make sure that you're doing a good job, and seeing if there's anything I can do to improve, your performance, us working together to improve your performance. And as long as you relate that that's what you're doing, then that makes the evaluation process not a bad process at all. Matter of fact, Professor Pierce has talked to me for a while about doing online classes, and I've always been like, maybe one day or just whatever. Well, this virus has caused us to have to do online classes. Of course, he and, as I mentioned in an earlier video, he and Dr. Campbell have been incredibly supportive of this effort. And I'm enjoying doing the online classes, but it sure is good to have two great professionals like that have your back. Okay, so performance appraisal, that's what this chapter is all about. It's important that you set the proper stage for performance appraisal. And remember, one more time, I'm looking at my handout, why do you do performance appraisal? The primary reason is to improve performance. So that kind of sets the stage. Now I looked at something else here, and it says, to do performance appraisals and to do them the way you need to do them, you've got to have a well-written job description. What is a job description? Okay, who can tell me what is a job description? And I know somebody out there saying, well, it's a description of the job. And that's really true. A job description are simply the tasks that a job performs. What is it that a job does? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What makes up the task of this job? What should this person be doing when they're doing this particular job? Next question. Which jobs in an organization should have a job description? Right again, every single job. If you don't have a job description, how do you as an employee know what you're supposed to do? And how can the supervisor evaluate you? Fred, what do you do? I don't know. They hired me and said go to work, and I've been hanging around here about 10 years. I just kind of walk around, do this, do that, and kind of help them whenever I don't know. So then when Joe decides to evaluate, how do you evaluate Fred? Well, I don't know. As long as he just kind of hangs around and kind of helps. And that's not the way it works. Every job should have a job description. And you should evaluate a person based upon their job description. Now, I'm going to throw in something else free. I'm not sure the chapter mentions this, but I'm going to mention it anyway. You also should have a job specification. What's a job specification? A job specification are the requirements necessary to perform that job. What requirements should the person have to perform that job? What experience level should they have? What skills they should have? What type of education should they have? What skills are you looking for? What education are you looking for? What experience are you looking for? What kind of a person do you need to perform this job? All right, so I'll ask, excuse me again. Which jobs need a job specification? All jobs. All jobs need a job description and a job specification. Should the supervisor ever have anything to do, maybe working with HR on putting these together? Yeah. Who better knows the job description? Who better know better the job description of the jobs of the people in a department than the supervisor in that department? So I'd like for you to be familiar with a couple of things here. I'd like for you to be familiar, let me get my notes. I'd like for you to be familiar with why you do performance appraisals to improve performance. I'd like for you to be familiar with what a job description is and what a job specification is. Now, if you're looking at the handout, here's something else that's important. When you evaluate an employee, you use some type of appraisal form. You use some type of an instrument that you use to evaluate that person, okay? You see this next sentence down here? Employees must know, excuse me, what is expected of them. They need to know their job description. Should you give them a copy of their job description? Sure. But look at this, comma, and how they will be evaluated. So they should know how I'm going to evaluate them? Well, sure. Should I even show them a blank copy of an evaluation form? Well, yeah. I mean, I have a blank copy of the evaluation form that they use here to evaluate me. Because I can see what, now how should you prepare when you have an evaluation instrument? You know, the one the supervisor uses to do the evaluation. Where should it come from? Well, it should come from the job description. All right. And so that being the case, if you're an employee, if you know the job description and you have a copy of the evaluation form, then you know what's expected of you, and you know what they're going to be looking for you to do. Because remember, the idea is this: to improve performance. To improve performance. An employee must know what is expected of them and how they'll be evaluated. Here's something I'd like for you to know. Normally, in these different chapters, if something comes up and it says the supervisor's role, have you noticed that a lot of times if it says a supervisor's role, I'll end up saying that should be a no item? Now, I've written just a couple of words down here for you. Let me borrow my text. And make sure, again, if you don't have your text, I want to help you a little bit here. Let me kind of talk a little bit about this. What is the supervisor's role in performance appraisal? You have some key words. Let me finish out these 3 key words for you. Preparing for the appraisal, doing the appraisal, and following up the appraisal. So that's those if you want to fill in the blanks. Preparing the appraisal, doing the appraisal, follow up the appraisal. When it comes to preparing for the appraisal, you should review the job description, review the evaluation instrument, make sure they're both up to date, make sure the employee knows what's expected of them and how they're going to be evaluated. Those are just some things that you need to do as you prepare as a supervisor for the appraisal. Doing the appraisal, well, first of all, you got to do it, and you want to do it objectively. Be very objective when you do the appraisal. Make sure that after you do the appraisal, you conduct the appraisal interview where you sit down with the employee. And make sure that when you're doing this, you do it in privacy. That's just some things that you need to do as you're doing the appraisal. And then following up the appraisal, encourage the employee, assist the employee with any recommendations that you have, and make sure you monitor and see what their performance is. Now here's what I'd like for you to know. I'd like for you to know the supervisor's role in performance appraisal. Preparing for the appraisal, doing the appraisal, follow up the appraisal. I'd like for you to write those 3 things down for me and just make a comment or 2 about each one. Kind of like what I did here. Not all of it, but just a comment or 2. So, a couple of things about preparing for the appraisal, reviewing the appraisal instrument, making sure that you've updated the job description, doing the appraisal, completing the appraisal instrument itself, being objective with it, prepare for the interview, conduct the appraisal interview, make sure you have privacy, and then following up the appraisal. Encourage the employee as you finish it, assist the employee in moving to that next level, and monitor their performance. I'd be sure that I knew that. Okay, all right. Now, let's talk about the appraisal instrument itself. The document that the supervisor is going to have in their hands when they do the appraisal. It's usually 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages long. And I want you to, we're getting a little bit crazy here, but not very much. I think we'll be fine. All performance appraisal forms should have at least. So what should make up an appraisal or an evaluation form? Performance criteria. On the appraisal form, it should have what your expectations are of the employee. Rating methodology. All right, if this is what you expect, how are they doing? A lot of times rating methodologies are numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 would be not at all, 5 would be excellent. Comment section. It's always a good idea on an appraisal form to have a comment section, maybe for the employee, where the employee can make a comment. And then certainly a comment section for the supervisor. Number 4, employee response section. Again, where that employee can respond to anything that was said. Supervisor's report section, kind of the final thing the supervisor wants to say. Now you can't, I know that you are not able to see this performance appraisal that I've got here in this text. So don't strain, don't put on your glasses, anything like that. But this is a performance appraisal instrument. Now, when you go down through these different things, performance criteria, quality of work, quantity of work, job knowledge, attendance, initiative, appearance. So those things, those were those performance criteria. Now, rating methodology. Here they use 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Let me just take, for example, job knowledge. A 3 would be inadequate. They don't know their job. 15, expert in all phases of work expected. And then a 6, 9, 12 in between. So if you were the supervisor and you're doing an evaluation of this person and you're using these different performance criteria, you would determine on each of these objectively where that person is. Job knowledge. Okay, I think I'm going to rate this person a 12. Knowledge, thorough enough to perform without assistance. Not an expert in everything, but they can do their job unassisted. So I would give them a 12. On attendance, a 3, excessively absent and tardy. A 15, almost never absent or tardy, never abuses sick leave or vacation. Well, Fred here's always here. He's never sick. I'm going to give him a 15. So anyway, that's where you would use the performance. This is the rating methodology. And then over here on this one, performance improvement. This is some things that the supervisor can use to say, here's some things perhaps that you could improve. Some specific recommendations. And then there's some additional space here that either the supervisor or the employee could use for additional comments. And then a place for the supervisor to sign, a place that the employee signs. Certification of employee, I hereby certify I have personally reviewed this evaluation. Doesn't say you absolutely agree with it or disagree with it, but you have reviewed that application. All right. So let me sit that back down and let me make sure that we are all still together. An appraisal form. These are just the different elements that a good appraisal form should have. All right. It's real important. Next section, not my best handwriting in chapter 7. I understand that, but if you're listening to the video, we'll get through this well. Keeping performance appraisals consistent and objective. You want these appraisal forms to be consistent. You want them to be objective. You want your appraisal to be a really good objective. Remember, legally speaking, there's a lot of laws and stuff involved with employees, and part of that as far as appraisal and everything. So you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly, honestly, to improve their performance in a legal manner. So he says, what are some things that you can do or should do to be able to, I know you hate it when I start a sentence and then I jump. But on this appraisal form, I would just be familiar with some of the different items that should be in an appraisal form. Now this is a be familiar with, you're not going to be writing them or anything like that. But if I did a good multiple choice question, which of the following is or is not part of an appraisal form, you would be able to pick that out. Something like that. Okay, I'm sorry. Back to keeping performance appraisal is consistent and objective. What are some things that you need to do to be sure you do that? First of all, review performance standards. Make sure that the standards are up to date, they're correct, and that sort of thing. You know, what you would hate to do is use a performance appraisal instrument here that's out of date. The job has changed, but you haven't changed the job description, or you haven't changed the appraisal form. So you want to do that. So make sure that you do that. Number two, in keeping the performance appraisal consistent, base ratings on facts. Whenever you rate somebody, if you give them a 3, a 6, a 9, a 12, or 15, be able to back up why. As a matter of fact, you might even make a comment. I know Professor Pierce, when he gives a rating, he always writes something below that says, based upon this. And it's a fact. So, base ratings on facts. Number 3, and this is on your handout as well, I'm just kind of using them both here. Avoid personality bias. Now, what in the world is that? We have a tendency to rate people that are like us higher. If a person has the same type of personality and stuff as we do, they got to be good because I'm good, you know? I mean, if I see somebody and they have my personality and that sort of thing, my tendency would be, well, they got to be pretty good. Well, they may be pretty good or may not be pretty good, but you you don't rate them on their personality. What do you rate them on? Job performance on the criteria that you're using. So be familiar with what personality bias is. Natural human tendency to rate those who are like us more highly. You're not ranking the person from a personality point of view. You're ranking the person from a job performance point of view, or appraising them. Next one, avoid extremes in assigning ratings. Look, if you give somebody all 3s, that person probably needs to be gone. If you give persons all 15s, they must be the best that's ever happened. Most people are not going to be all 3s, or not going to be all 15s. Or, you know, they're not going to be all terrible. They're all perfect. 20. Okay. Avoid the halo effect. That's where the halo effect. The halo is when he says it occurs when an employee's strong points cause you to overlook weak points. Okay, look. Fred, his job knowledge is probably a 15. He's an expert in all phases of his work. He really, really is. And his appearance is just always good. Excellent, 15. So, as a result of that, I rate him high on everything. See where we're coming from here? Let me do it one more time. Occurs when an employee's strong points cause you to overlook weak points. Now, it just happens that attendance-wise, Fred misses a good bit. And he doesn't have a whole lot of initiative. But his strong point of being such an expert, I just rate him up on everything. You do not want to do that. Now that's the idea of the halo effect. It occurs when an employee's strong points cause you to overlook weak points. If we talked about performance criteria, rate each performance criteria accurately and objectively. If they are that expert, then rate them a 15. If they're having attendance problems, rate them a 6, or whatever the appropriate rating should be. And then the last one he mentions here, and these are things, now he talks about avoiding the pecking order bias. I want to tell you what that is in just a moment. But here's what I want, here's the idea. These are just some things that you need to keep in mind to make sure that your performance appraisals are consistent and objective. You want to periodically review those performance standards to make sure they're still relevant. You want to base your ratings on facts. You want to avoid any personality bias. You want to probably avoid extremes for the most part, certainly not using all extremes. You want to avoid the halo effect, we're talking about, where a person's strong points cause you to overlook weak points. And you want to avoid pecking order bias. All right, here's what that is. Now this might be a little weird, but let's just say that you evaluate, now this wouldn't be weird. Let's say you're a principal of a school and you evaluate your faculty and you evaluate custodians. That wouldn't be unusual at all. And you've got this rating methodology. And let's just say you use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you rate your faculty members and you have, say, 6 different rating criteria. So 6 different criteria, 5, the highest rating that anybody could get would be a 30. Okay? And you may have a faculty member or two that gets a 30. All right. Then you're rating custodians, and you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know, they have their performance criteria as well. And so then you rate, and you've got a really good custodian, and you rate them as a 30. You say, oh, wait a minute, I can't do that. I can't rate this custodian as a 30 because I'm rating faculty members as 30. And this custodians, although they do great work, they're not really like faculty that work with students, so I can't give them a 30. Well, sure you can. I mean, if they happen to make a 30, you can give them a 30 because you're rating custodians based upon one set of performance criteria and rating methodology, and you're rating faculty on a different. And so let me explain again, make sure we understand what this is. And I've already told you, I think, or maybe I haven't, but I will. Custodians, they perform incredibly valuable services as well as anybody else on the faculty. Avoiding pecking order bias. Supervisors sometimes rate employees in the more important jobs higher than those in the less important jobs. A problem referred to as pecking order bias. Be conscious of it when assessing ratings. You are not rating jobs as to their relative importance, but employees as to their performance in their respective jobs. So if you're rating custodians and you are rating brain surgeons, can both of them get can you have a 30 in each category or 2 30? Yeah. You're not comparing one to another. You're rating each one with their own methodology. Does that make sense? Okay, that's called a pecking order. Don't get involved in pecking order bias. Hope I still got you with me. I think so. So far we've talked a little bit about why we do performance appraisals to improve performance. We need a job description. We need a job specification. Employees need to know what's expected of them and how they're going to be evaluated. We talked about those are things that we need to be familiar with. We need to know the supervisor's role in performance appraisal. And we need to be familiar with what a good performance appraisal should contain. Performance criteria, rating methodology, and that sort of thing. And we need to be familiar with some of the things that are important when keeping our performance appraisals consistent and objective. Talking about reviewing standards and that sort of thing. We should be familiar with personality bias, with pecking order bias, and with the halo effect. All right. I'm turning my page over. With you, you're just probably going down to the next page that's on Canvas. He talks about conducting the appraisal interview, and I didn't do very much with that. I mean, I just threw out some words there. It's important to do a good job when you conduct the appraisal interview. You want to plan for improvement. You want to do counseling. You want to get feedback and that sort of thing. I threw those words out kind of at the top of my page. But something that I wanted us to be familiar with is this next thing: facilitating the appraisal interview. what are some things you can do to make the appraisal interview more effective? Because now let's make sure where we are. You have done the appraisal. You've come in with the clipboard or whatever, you've gone through and you've done the appraisal. It's an objective appraisal, it's based on facts, you've made notes and that sort of thing. Now you're sitting down with the employee and you're going over the appraisal. Facilitating the appraisal interview. I'd like for you to be familiar with these. Number one, explain the purpose of the performance appraisal. We're doing this to improve performance. Number two, discuss the ratings. Let them know, go through with them, give them a copy of it. That's Professor Pierce always does. And go through the ratings. Now don't go through, okay, number one was a 3, number 2 was a 9, number 3. Go through, explain the ratings and why you gave that rating. Because remember, if you were objective and you based it on facts, you can explain it. Number 3, solicit feedback. What do you think? Now, a couple of things. If an employee doesn't say anything, you solicit feedback. What do you have? They don't say anything. That does not mean they necessarily agree with you. So I think the idea, if you can get them to talk, that's fine. See if there is any disagreement or not. Find out how the employees might rate themselves. So I've never did that. In all the years that I did performance appraisals on people, I never had them do a performance appraisal and bring it in and do a rating on themselves. Now, if I were going through one of these things and I was discussing the ratings, I was soliciting feedback, and I gave somebody a 9, and they said, I think that's really a little low. I said, well, tell me why. Why do you think that? I based the 9 on these facts. What am I overlooking? What makes you know? So find out how the employees would rate themselves and why. If you're going to rate yourself a 15, why? What makes you a 15? Okay. If you're going to rate yourself a 9, I think you're a 12. Why don't you think you're a 12? You see? That idea. The next one, set goals for improvement. Always set goals. Can we do something better? Now, hey, look. This person is the best there ever is. I said one of the things you should avoid is extremes in ratings. But you really have a guy or a lady that's 15 all the way down. It's one of those rare individuals, and they are the best at everything. So you say, okay, you're the best at everything, go away. No, not really. Set goals for improvement. Can they improve? Well, they can improve. You may give them additional challenges. You may give them additional things to accomplish. Again, I'm sitting here doing an online class. Didn't think I was ever going to do that. It's a new horizon for me. It's a new whatever. Okay, so set goals for improvement. And then number 6, follow up and feedback. When you finish the appraisal interview, you've just started. When you get through with the appraisal interview, the interview should end. You have, here's what we're going to try to work on for next year. Or here are some things I want you to do in addition. Would you be willing to do this or take this and do whatever? Follow up and then feedback. Okay. So I'd just be familiar with some of these things that you can do to facilitate an appraisal interview. Now, the next little section here, I got a bunch of words just kind of out there, and I cut it off. Sorry. But on the very left-hand side, the words are corrective feedback. When you're giving feedback to employees, I want you to be familiar with it. Up here in this next section, discuss the rating, and when you're doing this sort of thing as a supervisor, be positive. You see that first thing? Be positive. Do it in a positive sort of way. Because remember, your ultimate is to improve performance. So as you're giving feedback, give your feedback in a positive manner. And you should know your employee's personality. You should know whether, do I start with the good stuff first? Do I start with the bad stuff first? Do I intermingle it? That sort of thing. But overall, be positive in the feedback that you give the employee. I mentioned to you a few minutes ago that there's a lot of legal aspects of performance appraisals. I do this sometimes. If you're thinking about when you're talking about human resources, or you're talking about, I'll call it human resource management. That has to do with finding the right folks, hiring the right folks, or I'll say selecting the right folks, hiring the right folks, training the right folks. Appraising people. This is kind of the human resource management process. Now, don't try to write this down. It's not that important. But the thing about it I wanted to say is all of this, there's a lot of legal things that are involved. There's legal things in going out and trying to find people. There's legal things in selecting people. There's certain things you can ask and not ask, and do and not do in the selection process. There's a legal way to actually hire people. So I'm just saying within human resource management, there's a lot of legal matters that you have to make sure that you adhere to. Your human resource department is going to help supervisors make sure that they do that. So the last part of this chapter, he talks about the legal aspects of performance appraisal. So let's look at some things that will keep us legal as it relates to performance appraisal. And I'd be familiar with these. Keep comprehensive records. Your performance appraisal, keep that. When you rate somebody a particular way, it may be the fact that you rate them that way because of something that has occurred throughout the year. Every time you've talked to that employee or every time you've seen that happen, you need to have documented that. And you have written documentation that you can almost attach to your performance appraisal. But keep comprehensive records about everything. Number 2, focus on performance, not personality. We've already talked about that. I'd much rather have an employee that I really wouldn't particularly want to be friends with because we're so different in our personalities and everything, but they're doing a great job, than I would have an employee that I'd love to be friends with, but they can't do the work. You understand? So when you're evaluating, and you're talking about a good employee, you're evaluating performance. You're not evaluating their personality. Number 3, we've already talked about this. Be positive, be constructive, and be specific. If you need improvement, tell why. Number 4, be honest and treat all employees the same. Well, we've talked about that throughout this course. You got to be honest. If you're not, are they going to find out? Yes. Treat all employees the same? Yes. Number 5, apply objective standards. Where do the standards come from? The standards, that performance criteria that we talked about, attendance, quality of work, quantity of work, that sort of thing. Where should those come from? From the job description. From the job description. And so you should have objective standards. Standards that are objective and can be measured quantitatively. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'd just be familiar with some of those legal aspects. The last thing in this chapter, and this chapter had several no's in it. I'm sorry, but no's are good things, because if you know the no's, you're going to do really well on the test, because you know the no's are going to probably be on the test. I gave you a sheet here that kind of talked about performance appraisals. And it kind of sums up what we've been talking about in this chapter. Performance appraisals consist of 6 steps. Let's know these. Step number 1, establishing performance standards from the job description. Step number 2, communicating those standards to the employee. The employee needs to know what's expected of them. Plus, they need to know how you're going to evaluate them. Number 3, evaluate performance. Once you have the standards, once the standards have been communicated to the employee, evaluate the performance. Number 4, and by the way, when I say I want you to know this, just what's in italics, just what I'm reading. Number 4, discuss the results with the employees. That's that interview process we talked about. Number 5, take corrective action. If there needs to be corrective action, work up a corrective action plan as you sit there and talk with the employee. If there doesn't need to be any corrective action, if they're doing a fantastic job, then come up with additional goals for that employee for the next year. Number 6, use the results to make decisions. Should this employee be moved towards termination? This is part of the documentation. We're going to talk about progressive discipline later on in another chapter. Their pay raises are coming up. They had a great score. They're certainly eligible for that highest pay raise. Is this person possibly supervisory material? Should this person, maybe when you're working up an action plan for them, might that action plan be giving them some supervisory training, preparing them to be a supervisor in the future? You see them as having supervisory abilities? Okay. So anyway, I would like for you to know those 6 steps in the performance appraisal. Now, this is free, down at the very bottom of the sheet. Don't want not to be familiar with, not a test with, but just listen for a second. In doing the performance appraisal, don't attack the employee personally, for goodness sakes. Critically evaluate his or her work. Do allow sufficient time without distractions for appraisals. Listen, when you're in the middle of an appraisal, you don't want the phone to ring and you answer it and get off on something else. Don't make the employee feel uncomfortable or uneasy. Put them at ease. Do include the employee in the process as much as possible. We talked about, ask for feedback, that sort of thing. How would you rate yourself? Number 5, don't wait until the appraisal to address problems with the employee's work. If you see it's 7 months until you're going to do an appraisal, and you see an employee and they're doing something really wrong, you say, you know what, I got to talk to them about that in 7 months. No. You're a supervisor. You're a trainer. You're a mentor. You're a leader. You take care of those things when they happen. And do end the appraisal with positive suggestions. We talked about being positive. That's very, very important. Okay, it's one of those things that you as a supervisor are going to have to do. You're going to have to evaluate your employees. It should be something you look forward to doing. It really is. Because if you improve the performance of your employees, it's going to improve the performance of your department. And when your employees do well and your department does well, you're going to be doing well. Because remember, somebody's evaluating you. And how good an evaluation you get is going to be based a lot upon your employees. Because as a supervisor, you're managing people. And most times those people are going to be the ones that make you look good or make you look bad. So the better you can do to improve them, in essence, the better you're doing to improve yourself. Okay, that is chapter 7. We've got 5, 6, and 7 done. I'm going to go back over my hairstylist wants to touch up my hair before I do chapter 8. Do a little bit of makeup, that sort of thing, make me look as handsome, even more handsome than I am, which I know is incredibly hard to do. I know you're laughing, that's okay. But we're going to let them work me over a little bit, take care of me, get me all ready, and I'm going to come back probably, I'm not sure when you'll view the chapter 8 video, but I'm going to come back and do that chapter 8 video in just a few minutes. Performance appraisal, important things that supervisors do. To be successful, set the stage properly. It's about improving performance. Okay, I'm going to do the loud clap that lets the executive producer, Ryan Pierce, know that I have finished chapter 7, and I'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Do chapter 8.